The police report called it a non-compliant subject. The hospital security footage showed a 75-year-old black man, a decorated Marine veteran, sitting calmly in his wheelchair. And then the officer fired his taser. That veteran was Melvin Carter, a retired master sergeant with 25 years in the Marine Corps. He was outside the VA hospital where he receives treatment for service-connected injuries. This single act of brutality against a defenseless hero would ignite a firestorm, because the next morning, his brothers in arms would arrive to deliver a message the police would never forget. To understand why 40 Marines would mobilize, you first have to understand who they were mobilizing for. Melvin "Ghost" Carter wasn't just any veteran. He served with the 1st Marine Division, with tour in Fallujah and Ramadi. The wheelchair was a recent addition, the result of degenerative spinal damage that the VA had finally, after years of appeals, recognized as service-connected. That morning in early March, he had arrived at the VA Medical Center for a routine pain management appointment. The system was backlogged, as it often is. After a 3-hour wait, he was told his doctor had been called into emergency surgery. Frustrated but resigned, Master Sergeant Carter wheeled himself outside for air. He positioned himself in a designated smoking area, a quiet corner of the loading zone, to call his daughter. Officer Brian Jessup saw a different picture. A dispatcher's call reported a disruptive individual possibly intoxicated, blocking hospital access. Jessup, 28, had been with the city police force for 6 years. His training on interacting with veterans with disabilities, according to later department audits, totaled 90 minutes 5 years prior. He approached what he saw as a protocol issue, a man in a wheelchair where he shouldn't be. The body camera footage, later obtained by Internal Affairs, tells the story Jessup believed. His commands are clear, firm. "Sir, you need to move. This is a restricted area." Melvin Carter, his phone still to his ear, held up a finger. "One moment, officer. I'm on with my family." In that split second, a reasonable request to a veteran father collided with a perceived challenge to police authority. Jessup's posture changed. He moved closer, his shadow falling over Carter. "I won't ask again. Move the chair or I will move it for you." The Marine in Carter recognized the escalation. He ended the call. "My apologies, officer. The wheels are locked. Let me just..." He never finished the sentence. What Jessup interpreted as reaching for something beneath his leg, a weapon perhaps, was Carter feeling for the lever to release the wheel locks. Jessup shouted, "Don't move," and unholstered his taser. The probe struck Carter high in the chest. 50,000 volts surged through the body of a man with a documented heart condition and a fragile spine. He seized, then slumped forward, held upright only by his wheelchair straps. A nurse named Anya Sharma, on her break, witnessed everything from a third-floor window. She later testified she heard Carter say, "I can't, my heart," before he went limp. The aftermath was procedural chaos. An ambulance was called. Jessup filed his report. Subject was non-compliant and made furtive movements indicative of a weapons search. The taser deployment was listed as justified. Melvin Carter was admitted to the very hospital he'd been waiting outside, now in the cardiac intensive care unit. But here is where the system cracked. Nurse Sharma didn't just watch. She recorded the final 30 seconds on her phone, and she knew a veteran when she saw one. The faded Semper Fi tattoo on Carter's forearm, visible as his sleeve rode up during the convulsion, told her everything. She didn't go to the hospital administrators. She went directly to a veterans outreach counselor on staff, a former Navy corpsman named David Ruiz. Ruiz accessed Carter's file: 25 years of service, a Bronze Star, a medical discharge at the rank of Master Sergeant. He saw the police report narrative taking shape, a story that would paint a war hero as a belligerent, unstable nuisance. So Ruiz made a call, not to a lawyer but to a former Marine gunnery sergeant named Marcus Thorne, who ran a local nonprofit for wounded veterans. Thorne listened in silence. Then he asked two questions. Is Ghost alive? And what's the name of the officer? By midnight, a different network was humming. Text chains between active-duty Marines at Camp Lejeune, 200 miles away, lit up. A retired master sergeant, a brother, had been tasered by police while sitting in his wheelchair. The details were fragmented, but the outrage was crystalline. Meanwhile, in his hospital bed, Melvin Carter regained consciousness. Tubes ran from his arms. His daughter, Maya, a civil paralegal, held his hand. She showed him the police report on her tablet. His eyes, clouded with medication and pain, cleared for a moment, focusing on the phrase combative behavior. He whispered a single word, a name from a lifetime ago. Thorne. At precisely 0600 the next morning, a convoy of 15 vehicles left Camp Lejeune. They were not on official orders. They were on what they considered a moral imperative. In the lead car, Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Thorne stared straight ahead, his dress blue uniform immaculate, a folded American flag on the seat beside him. He was not driving to a protest. He was driving to return a salute. Back at the city police station, the morning shift change was underway. Officer Jessup, having worked the night shift, was finishing his paperwork. His sergeant slapped him on the back, joking about the rowdy vagrant from the VA. The dispatcher's voice suddenly crackled over the intercom, confusion edging her professional tone. We have a situation forming out front." Jessup walked to the window, and what he saw made the blood drain from his face. Lining the sidewalk in perfect, silent formation were 40 United States Marines in full dress uniform. They were not shouting. They were not carrying signs. They stood at parade rest, an unbroken wall of blue and gold, their eyes fixed ahead on the station doors. A senior staff sergeant took one precise step forward. He did not speak to the gathering news cameras. He spoke to the building itself, his voice cutting through the morning air. "We are here for Master Sergeant Melvin Carter. We will speak to your chief. We will wait." Inside the station, panic was instant and total. The police chief was at a budget meeting. The mayor's phone began to ring. And Officer Brian Jessup realized with a sinking, terrifying clarity that the man in the wheelchair was not just a subject in a report. He was family, and his family had just declared war. For 47 minutes, the Marines held their line in silence. It was a silence more deafening than any protest chant. Inside the police station, Chief Daniel Rivera burst through the back entrance, having raced from his budget meeting. His command staff huddled in his glass-walled office, voices overlapping. "They're not moving, Chief. The news chopper is already in the air. What's the play here? Do we arrest them?" Rivera looked at the monitor showing the feed from the front steps. He didn't see a mob. He saw a formation, a military formation on his civilian doorstep. His own 6 years in the Army Reserves gave him a cold, clear understanding of the discipline he was witnessing. This was not a spontaneous riot. This was a calculated demonstration. "Where's Jessup?" Rivera asked, his voice low. "Locker room," a captain answered. "He's shaken up." "Get him now." Officer Brian Jessup entered, still in his uniform from the night shift, his face pale. The chief didn't mince words. "The man you tasered yesterday, Master Sergeant Melvin Carter, tell me everything. And I mean everything, Jessup. What aren't we seeing on your report?" Across town in the cardiac unit, Maya Carter was on her own phone, not with lawyers yet, but with historians. She was compiling her father's service record, photographing every medal, every citation. She knew the court of public opinion would convene long before any real court. A text from David Ruiz, the VA counselor, buzzed through. "Turn on Channel 7. On screen, the live broadcast showed the Marine formation. The camera zoomed in on the staff sergeant who had spoken. His name tape read VALDEZ. A reporter shoved a microphone toward him. "Staff Sergeant, what is your message for the police department?" Valdez did not turn his head. His eyes remained forward. "Our message is our presence. We are here for accountability. We will speak only to the chain of command." It was a masterstroke. They weren't demanding, They were insisting. They were using the language of structure against the structure itself. Back in the chief's office, Jessup was unraveling. Under the intense questioning, his story began to develop cracks. The furtive movement became less certain. The ignored commands were now a veteran asking for a moment to finish a call to his daughter. Rivera had seen enough. He ordered Jessup to surrender his body camera and taser for immediate review by Internal Affairs. As Jessup left the room, the chief turned to his public information officer. "We need a statement. Now. Something that doesn't pour gasoline on this." But it was too late. Nurse Anya Sharma had already poured the gasoline. From a secure email account, she sent her 30-second cell phone video to 3 local news stations and the investigative team at the Washington Post. The subject line read, "VA nurse witness to police tasing of disabled Marine vet." The video hit the internet at 10:17 a.m. By 10:20, it was trending nationally. The footage was brutal in its clarity. You could see Carter's polite nod, his attempt to explain, Jessup's sudden aggressive lean-in, the flash of the taser, and Carter's body convulsing against the wheelchair restraints. The audio captured Carter's strained gasp, "I can't. My heart." Public reaction was instantaneous and volcanic. The police department's social media accounts were flooded. Veterans groups across the country began amplifying the story. The narrative flipped from "police handle disruptive subject" to "decorated Marine veteran tasered in wheelchair at VA." Chief Rivera watched the video on his phone, his stomach turning to lead. He now had 2 conflicting pieces of evidence: his officer's sanitized report and a viral video that told a profoundly different story. He made a decision. He walked out the front doors of the station. The Marines didn't break their formation, but 40 pairs of eyes tracked him. Rivera stopped before Staff Sergeant Valdez. He spoke not as a chief to a protester, but as a former soldier to a serving NCO. "Staff Sergeant, I am Chief Daniel Rivera. I have seen the new video. I am ordering an immediate, full internal affairs investigation. I am personally going to the hospital to speak with Master Sergeant Carter and his family. Will you grant me passage?" It was a shrewd move. Acknowledgement, not confrontation. Valdez offered the slightest nod. "We will stand down, Chief. For now, we will be watching." With a silent hand signal, the formation broke. The Marines turned in unison and marched back to their vehicles. They had achieved their first objective. They had forced the highest level of attention. But as Rivera drove to the hospital, his phone rang. It was the mayor. The conversation was tense. The mayor was hearing from business owners, from city council members worried about optics and police morale. His instruction was clear. "Manage this, Dan. Make it go away. A quiet settlement, maybe. Don't let this become a referendum on the department." Rivera arrived at the hospital to find a new scene brewing. A dozen local veterans, some in motorcycle club cuts, others in simple fatigues, had gathered in the parking lot. They weren't a formal formation, but their presence was a clear message. The Marines had left, but the watch had not. Upstairs, Maya Carter met the chief outside her father's room. She was holding a tablet with her father's service record displayed. "Before you go in, Chief, you should know who you're talking to. Bronze Star with Valor Device, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal with Combat V, 3 Purple Hearts, 25 years of service. He's not a subject. He's Master Sergeant Melvin Carter." Rivera absorbed the information like a physical blow. He entered the room. Melvin Carter was propped up on pillows, monitors beeping softly. He looked older than his years, but his eyes were alert, sharp. He regarded the police chief with a calm that was more intimidating than anger. "Master Sergeant," Rivera began, "on behalf of the department, I want to express my profound regret for what happened." Carter interrupted, his voice a rasp but steady. "Regret is for spilling coffee, Chief. What happened was an assault by one of your men. We can start with that word." The veteran had immediately reframed the conversation away from apology and toward accountability. He asked for 2 things: the full, unedited body camera footage and the immediate public release of the officer's name. Rivera could not promise either. As the chief left, frustrated, Maya handed him a formal request for all evidence, preserved under federal Veterans Protection statutes. The fight was moving from the street to the legal arena. Meanwhile, internal affairs had begun their work. The review of Officer Jessup's body camera footage revealed the critical missing context. The audio, which Jessup claimed captured aggressive refusal, actually captured Carter saying, "One moment, officer. I'm on with my family." The furtive movement was a clear, slow reach for the wheelchair lock, not a dive for a weapon. The Internal Affairs lieutenant, a woman named Ana Flores, called Rivera. "Chief," she said, her tone grave. "The use of force report doesn't match the video, not even close." Jessup escalated the situation prematurely. "The taser deployment is questionable at best, reckless at worst. And there's more." "What more?" Rivera asked, pinching the bridge of his nose. "We pulled Jessup's record. He's had 3 prior complaints for excessive force, all settled internally. All involved minorities. His training file shows he's overdue for de-escalation recertification by 8 months. A pattern, that was the worst-case scenario. A single bad incident could be managed. A pattern was a systemic cancer." Rivera now faced an impossible choice: protect his officer and risk the entire department's credibility, or throw Jessup to the wolves and face a rebellion from the police union. That evening, the story found a new, powerful voice. A national cable news host, a former Marine officer himself, dedicated his entire opening segment to the case. He didn't just show the nurse's video. He juxtaposed it with photos of a young Melvin Carter in uniform in Iraq, and then with the hospital bed image. The chyron read, "From combat to cardiac care, a veteran's betrayal." The pressure was now national. The Department of Justice tweeted that they were monitoring the situation. The Commandant of the Marine Corps released a carefully worded statement expressing deep concern for one of their own and confidence in the investigative process. In a quiet apartment across town, Officer Brian Jessup watched the coverage alone. The image of the Marines on his station steps played on a loop. The news anchor recited Carter's military honors. His phone buzzed with a text from the police union rep: "Lawyer up, don't talk to anyone." Then a second text from an unknown number: "You messed with the wrong family." He poured a drink, his hand trembling. The story he'd told himself, that he was dealing with a potentially dangerous, non-compliant person, was crumbling under the weight of a different story. That of a war hero, a disabled man, a human being. The cognitive dissonance was terrifying. The next morning, the escalation took a legal turn. A renowned civil rights attorney, Aaliyah Vance, held a press conference on the hospital steps. Flanked by Maya Carter and Gunnery Sergeant Thorne, she announced she was filing a federal lawsuit against the police department, the city, and Officer Brian Jessup personally. The charges included excessive force, violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She also filed an emergency motion to preserve all evidence, citing a pattern of obfuscation. But the most stunning revelation came next. Attorney Vance presented a signed affidavit from David Ruiz, the VA counselor. In it, Ruiz stated that after the incident, he had overheard 2 VA police officers discussing the city police report. One officer reportedly said, "Jessup's narrative is clean. Just another crazy vet causing trouble. They'll believe us over him." The implication was explosive: coordination between agencies to smear the victim. The story was no longer about one officer's bad decision. It was about a system primed to dismiss and discredit vulnerable veterans. Chief Rivera's attempt at containment had failed utterly. The mayor called an emergency closed-door session with the city council. The discussion was no longer about optics, but about liability, about millions in potential lawsuit payouts, about a department spinning out of control. As the council argued, a fresh piece of intelligence landed on Rivera's desk. His detectives, monitoring online chatter, found a closed Facebook group for active duty Marines at Camp Lejeune. Screenshots showed plans for a second, larger demonstration if Jessup was not arrested by the end of the week. The post read, "They sent 40 of us as a courtesy. Next time we bring the whole battalion." Rivera stood at his window looking at the now empty street where the Marines had stood. The silence was gone, replaced by a ringing tension. He had 48 hours before the next storm arrived, and he still didn't have the one thing that could possibly diffuse it, the unvarnished truth from his own officer. He picked up the phone and dialed Internal Affairs. "Bring Jessup back in. It's time he watched his own video with us." The interrogation room was cold and silent save for the hum of the recording equipment. Officer Brian Jessup sat across from Internal Affairs Lieutenant Ana Flores, with Chief Rivera observing behind the one-way glass. On the monitor between them, Jessup's body camera footage played. They watched his approach, heard his commands, saw Melvin Carter's polite request for a moment. Flores paused the video. "Officer Jessup, at this point, what was your perceived threat?" The subject is seated, restrained by a wheelchair on the phone. Jessup's eyes were fixed on the frozen image of his own hand reaching for his taser. He was non-compliant. He didn't immediately obey. "He asked for one moment," Flores pressed, her voice neutral. "Protocol for dealing with persons with disabilities suggests patience, not escalation. Did his tone seem aggressive to you?" I had a call about a disruptive person. I had to secure the scene." Jessup's answers were becoming robotic, rehearsed. Flores advanced the footage frame by frame. "Show me the furtive movement, the one you said indicated a weapon search." The video showed Carter's hand moving slowly, openly, toward the side of his chair. "That looks like he's reaching for a lever. Did you see a weapon?" Jessup said nothing. He just stared. Behind the glass, Rivera closed his eyes. He was watching a career, and potentially his department's reputation, disintegrate in real time. Then came the moment. The taser deployment, Carter's body seizing, and the audio clear as day of Carter's strained, gasping voice. "I calm my heart." Flora stopped the video. The room was utterly silent. She let the words hang in the air for a full 10 seconds. "Officer Jessup, you heard him say he had a heart problem. The medical alert bracelet was visible on his wrist in this footage. You deployed an electrical weapon against a man with a known cardiac condition. Explain your use of force continuum reasoning." Jessup's facade shattered. His shoulders slumped. I didn't process it in the moment. It was fast." "It was 7 seconds from your first command to deploying the taser," Flora stated flatly. "That's not fast, that's predetermined." She slid a document across the table. It was a printout of his training records. "You're 8 months overdue for de-escalation recertification, and you had 3 prior complaints, all dismissed internally. Tell me about Mr. Delgado in 2019. You pepper-sprayed him while he was in handcuffs." This was no longer about one incident. This was about a pattern and the system that enabled it. Jessup asked for a lawyer. The interview was over. But as Rivera left the observation room, his tech specialist intercepted him, her face pale. "Chief, we have a bigger problem. The original body cam file from Jessup's unit. It was tampered with." They hurried to the tech lab. The specialist pulled up the file metadata. "The file we just reviewed was saved at 10:04 a.m. yesterday after the incident, but look here." She pointed to a log. An earlier version of the file was created at 09:17 a.m., right after he got back to his patrol car. That file was deleted. This current file is 32 seconds shorter. 32 seconds, the critical half-minute surrounding the tasering itself. Someone had attempted to erase the original, unedited record and replace it with a trimmed version. The question was who? Jessup alone, or did he have help? While the department spiraled internally, the external pressure reached a fever pitch. The veterans' protest outside the station had swelled from dozens to over 200. They were not just local vets now. Groups from the American Legion, the VFW, and the Disabled American Veterans had mobilized. They carried signs with photos of other veterans killed or injured in encounters with police. Names like Carl Anderson, the Marine tasered in the hospital, and Joshua Rora, whose service dog was killed. A new, chilling chant had started. He fought for us. Now we fight for him. The story had become a symbol, a rallying point for a deep, festering distrust between the veteran community and law enforcement. In his hospital room, Melvin Carter was undergoing a different kind of interrogation. A forensic psychologist hired by attorney Aaliyah Vance was assessing the trauma. The psychologist's report would later describe symptoms of severe post-traumatic stress, directly triggered by the tasering, a sensation he associated with explosive blasts in combat. The assault had not just injured his body, it had reignited the wounds of war. Maya Carter, armed with this report and her father's full service record, did something brilliant. She didn't just send it to the news. She sent it directly to the Inspector General of the Department of Veterans Affairs and to the chair of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. The subject line: Systematic failure, VA patient assaulted by law enforcement on federal property. This moved the chess piece onto a federal board. The VA, sensitive to decades of criticism over its treatment of veterans, could not ignore an assault on its own grounds. Suddenly, the VA police were under scrutiny for their role in the initial disruptive person call. Who made it? Was it accurate? David Ruiz, the VA counselor, was now a key witness for the federal side. He revealed to investigators that the disturbance call had come from a hospital administrator, not medical staff, after a complaint from a visitor who simply felt uncomfortable seeing a lone veteran in the loading zone. The call had been amplified from uncomfortable to disruptive and possibly armed as it moved through the dispatch chain. The narrative was now a perfect storm. A biased initial call, a poorly trained officer with a history of aggression, a deliberate attempt to tamper with evidence, and a systemic rush to blame the victim. Chief Rivera called an emergency press conference. He stood before a forest of microphones, looking exhausted. He announced Officer Jessup had been placed on unpaid administrative leave. He announced the internal investigation had found the use of force not in accordance with department policy. He did not say it was criminal. He did not release the body cam footage. And he did not apologize to Melvin Carter by name. The reaction was fury. Gunnery Sergeant Thorne watched the press conference from a bar near Camp Lejeune, surrounded by active-duty Marines. When Rivera finished without mentioning Carter's rank or service, Thorne put down his beer. "That's it," he said quietly. Then he picked up his phone. The next morning, the city awoke to a new, coordinated social media campaign. The hashtag #AnswerTheQuestion began trending. The question, posted by dozens of veteran accounts, was simple. You named the officer. Why won't you name the master sergeant? But the true bomb dropped at noon. An investigative journalist at the local paper, who had been digging into the department's budget, published a story. The city had paid out over $4 million in the past 5 years to settle police misconduct lawsuits. The officer involved in the 3 largest settlements, Brian Jessup. The cases had been sealed as part of the settlements, hiding the details from public view. The mayor's office had known, the city attorney had known, and they had kept Jessup on the street. Rivera read the article in disbelief. He called the mayor, his voice shaking with rage. "You knew about his history, the settlements." The mayor's response was cold, political. "We settled to avoid costly litigation, Dan. Those agreements are confidential for a reason. You need to control your officer now, not blame past administrations." Rivera realized he was not just fighting Jessup or the union. He was fighting a city government that valued quiet payouts over accountability. He was alone. That afternoon, the forensic report on the body camera file came back. The deletion of the original file was traced to a terminal logged into the department's evidence server at 9:52 a.m. The login credentials belonged to a sergeant in the evidence room. But the security camera for that hallway had been accidentally turned off for maintenance at 9:45. A cover-up within the department. This was no longer negligence. This was obstruction. Confronted with the evidence, the sergeant broke down. He admitted Jessup had come to him, panicked, saying the audio made him look bad. The sergeant, a friend and mentor to Jessup, had tried to help him fix it. He had no idea the original file was still recoverable from the cloud backup. Rivera now had a clear, documented conspiracy to tamper with evidence. He had no choice. He called the district attorney. Within 2 hours, arrest warrants were issued for Officer Brian Jessup and the evidence room sergeant for tampering with physical evidence, a felony. As the sun set, unmarked cars pulled up to 2 different homes. The news cameras captured Jessup in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock, being led from his apartment. The image was broadcast live. The officer who tasered a disabled veteran was now a prisoner himself. In the hospital, Melvin Carter watched the footage on the news. He showed no triumph, only a deep, weary sadness. He turned to his daughter. They broke him to save themselves. He's a symptom, Maya, not the disease. The disease was the next target. And at that moment, Attorney Aaliyah Vance was filing a motion to depose the police chief, the mayor, and the city attorney to uncover who knew what about Jessup's history and when. The lawsuit was now a spear aimed at the heart of the city's power structure. But as night fell, the most ominous development of all occurred. The command staff at Camp Lejeune, after a closed-door meeting, issued a formal request to the city. They asked for a meeting between their Judge Advocate General's Corps, their military lawyers, and the city's legal team. The subject: protocols for interactions between civilian law enforcement and military personnel and veterans on federal property. The Marines were no longer just standing outside. They were preparing to engage on a legal battlefield. The message was clear. This was not over. The 40 Marines at the station had been the warning shot. The full weight of the United States Marine Corps legal apparatus was now the promised battalion. Chief Rivera sat in his dark office, the warrants signed, the arrests made. But instead of relief, he felt a crushing dread. He had contained nothing. He had only opened the door to a wider, more terrifying fight, one he was now losing on every front. The battle for the truth was over. The war for justice was just beginning. The felony charges against Officer Brian Jessup changed everything. They transformed a political crisis into a criminal one. Jessup's arrest triggered an immediate chain reaction. The police union, which had promised fierce protection, suddenly went silent. Their legal insurance did not cover felony indictments for evidence tampering. Jessup was on his own. He was released on bail, but his career was over. The district attorney, smelling blood in the water, convened a grand jury to consider additional charges for the tasering itself: felony assault and negligent injury of a disabled person. The testimony of nurse Anya Sharma and the forensic analysis of the body camera footage made for a damning presentation. But the most powerful witness was never called. Melvin Carter, still recovering, provided a videotaped deposition from his hospital room. In it, he spoke not with anger but with a devastating clarity. He described the sensation of the taser as like an IED going off inside my chest, triggering a flashback to Ramadi. He detailed the humiliation of being paralyzed, helpless, as a man in authority inflicted pain. The grand jury took less than 3 hours to return indictments on all counts. Facing the possibility of a decade in prison, Jessup's defense attorney entered into plea negotiations. The deal was stark. Jessup would plead guilty to misdemeanor assault and the evidence-tampering felony. In exchange, he would resign from the police force permanently, surrender his law enforcement certification, and cooperate fully with the federal civil rights investigation into the department's patterns and practices. There would be no jail time, but there would be a public judicial confession. In a subdued courtroom, a hollowed-out Brian Jessup stood before a judge and the cameras. In a flat voice, He admitted he had used excessive force, that he had ignored clear signs of disability, and that he had asked a colleague to help him alter the evidence. He turned and looked directly at Melvin Carter, who was present in his wheelchair. "Master Sergeant Carter," Jessup said, his voice breaking, "I am sorry for the pain I caused you and your family. There is no excuse." Carter gave a single, slow nod. It was not forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. The legal chapter was closing. The consequences rippled outward. Chief Daniel Rivera, facing the results of the federal Patterns and Practices investigation, was forced to resign. The city agreed to a sweeping consent decree. It mandated drastic reforms, mandatory, intensive de-escalation and disability awareness training for all officers, the creation of a civilian oversight board with real subpoena power, and the public disclosure of all prior misconduct settlements. The $4 million in hidden payouts became public record, sparking a cleanup of the city attorney's office. For Melvin Carter, the victory was personal and profound. The city settled his federal lawsuit for $8.5 million, but Carter, in a move that stunned everyone, directed a majority of those funds. He established the Carter Foundation for Veteran Justice, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal aid to veterans in disputes with the VA and law enforcement, and to funding specialized training for police on veteran-specific trauma. His physical recovery was long. The taser aggravating his heart condition meant more procedures, more therapy. But his spirit, he said, was stronger than ever. He moved out of the cramped apartment he'd been in and, with his daughter Maya's help, bought a small, accessible home. On the porch, he flies 2 flags, the Stars and Stripes and the Marine Corps banner. The surprising detail, the one that truly signaled change, came from the Veterans Affairs Hospital itself. Under pressure from the Inspector General's report, the VA instituted a new national protocol. Any call for law enforcement assistance regarding a veteran on VA property now requires mandatory consultation with a mental health or veteran services professional before police are dispatched. The policy is literally named the Carter Protocol. Nurse Anya Sharma was promoted to head a new patient advocacy unit. But what of the 40 Marines? They faced no formal discipline. Their commanding officers, after reviewing the events, determined their assembly was a lawful, orderly gathering to express concern for a fellow Marine. It was classified as a command-sponsored moral activity. In fact, the Marine Corps quietly incorporated the case study into its transition assistance program, teaching separating Marines about their rights and how to navigate civilian encounters. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Thorne retired a year later. He now works alongside Melvin Carter at the Foundation. The 2 old warriors, one standing, one seated, tour police academies together. They don't lecture about blame. They teach about perspective. They show the body camera footage. They explain what a 1,000-yard stare really means, why a veteran might not make eye contact, how a wheelchair isn't just a chair, it's a battlefield. Officer Brian Jessup moved out of state. He works in warehouse logistics. He is, by all accounts, a quiet man. In a final interview with the federal investigators, he was asked what he learned. He said, "I saw a problem to be solved. He was a person who needed help. I failed to see the difference." The story did not end with a perfect victory. The police department is still struggling with reform. Some officers resent the consent decree. Distrust in the veteran community lingers, but a line was drawn. A precedent was set. On the 1-year anniversary of the tasering, a small ceremony was held outside the VA hospital. A plaque was unveiled, not commemorating the violence but affirming a commitment. It reads, "On this site, we reaffirm our duty to honor and protect those who have borne the battle." Master Sergeant Melvin Carter, in his dress blues, saluted as a Marine played taps. The 40 Marines did not show up that day. They didn't need to. Their message had been received. They had stood on a sidewalk not just for one man but for an idea. That the uniform a person once wore still matters, that service creates a bond that outlasts duty, and that accountability, when demanded with enough silent, unified resolve, is a force even the most rigid systems cannot ignore. The story of Melvin Carter is a map. It shows how a single spark of injustice, when met with courage, evidence, and the unbreakable loyalty of brothers in arms, can light a fire that burns away shadows and forces a long overdue dawn. So what does this story truly leave us with? Not just a tale of one veteran wronged and then vindicated, but a blueprint. A blueprint for how silence can be broken, how evidence can cut through lies, and how loyalty can become a tangible force for change. The 40 Marines on the sidewalk showed us that some bonds are forged in places no badge or policy can ever reach. They reminded a city and a nation of a simple, forgotten truth: you do not leave your people behind. The system did not fix itself. It was forced by a nurse with a cell phone, by a counselor who refused to look away, by a daughter who weaponized research, and by brothers in arms who presented a bill that had finally come due. The Carter Protocol at the VA, the consent decree at the police department, these are not spontaneous acts of goodwill. They are monuments to sustained pressure. This story asks each of us a question. Where are the lines in our own communities that need to be redrawn? What injustices are being dismissed as complicated or unfortunate when they are, in fact, simple failures of dignity and duty? Melvin Carter's wheelchair became an unexpected podium. His quiet dignity, amplified by the roar of his community, proved that the most powerful stance is often not an aggressive one, but a rooted one. We are left, then, with a measure of hope. Hope that a single witness with a camera can tilt the scales. Hope that institutional walls can crack when confronted with unified, principled resolve. And hope that the concept of service, whether to country or to community, can still be the highest currency we share. The journey of Master Sergeant Carter continues, as does the work of holding systems accountable. For every story like this that reaches the light, there are others still waiting in the shadows. That is why telling them matters. If this story resonated with you, leave a like to support this channel. And subscribe, because we are dedicated to bringing you more documentaries that shine a light on the truths that shape our world. The next story is already waiting. Thank you for watching.